The words hung in the air like shattered crystal, "These pieces cost more than your annual salary. People like you don't belong here." The flagship boutique on Fifth Avenue fell into a sudden hush. Every gaze turned toward the casually dressed woman who had dared inquire about the $85,000 sapphire pendant. Some customers murmured in irritation while others exchanged knowing glances, satisfied to witness someone's ambition being firmly checked. Alexander Harrington, the store director, stood with arms crossed, his silver-streaked hair perfectly coiffed. Steel-gray eyes assessed Elena Morales with undisguised disdain. His every gesture carried the weight of presumed authority in this world of luxury and privilege. Security Officer Marcus approached reluctantly, bound by duty. Alexander gestured toward the exit with manicured precision. "Marcus, please escort this woman out. She's causing a disturbance." No one could have anticipated the revelation about to unfold. No one guessed the true identity of the woman being insulted, and nobody suspected that within minutes, a storm would sweep through that would transform not just Celestial Gems, but the entire landscape of high-end retail in America. New York City, a crisp autumn morning wrapped in light fog. The chill seeped into every corner, frosting the windows of sleek skyscrapers along Fifth Avenue. Standing before the gleaming facade of Celestial Gems, Manhattan's most prestigious jewelry boutique, Elena Morales pulled her navy wool coat tighter and took a steadying breath before pushing open the heavy glass door. She hadn't dressed to impress: simple coat, dark jeans, comfortable flats, her thick black hair gathered in a practical bun. Yet Elena carried herself with quiet confidence and seasoned poise that made her stand out against the opulent backdrop. Her warm brown skin and determined gaze marked her as someone not to be underestimated. The moment her foot touched the polished marble floor, her steps echoed beneath crystal chandeliers that cast prismatic light over rows of display cases. Every detail spoke of extravagance and exclusivity, a silent proclamation of status and power. Yet to the staff, Elena might as well have been invisible. Near the entrance, young associates in tailored black attire nodded welcomingly to clients arriving from chauffeur-driven cars. A silver-haired woman in a cashmere wrap entered, and an attendant immediately offered her champagne, smiling brightly. Elena paused, surveying the showroom, noting the security guard's watchful gaze, the evaluating stares from the reception desk. She felt the chill of indifference masquerading as politeness, as if her presence were an intrusion in their rarefied world. No one approached to greet her. No welcoming smile, not even a perfunctory acknowledgement. To them, Elena was merely a shadow, an unwelcome visitor in this temple of luxury. But Elena didn't falter. She was accustomed to being excluded from circles of privilege, all too familiar with judgments based on appearance. Her shoulders remained squared, her stride purposeful as she moved deeper into the store, her fingertips grazing the glass case housing those coveted sapphires. She knew she was entering a world where judgments were made at first glance. Yet none realized that the unassuming woman before them was, in fact, the new owner of this very establishment. A cool breeze brushed past as the door closed behind her. Outside, the city continued its relentless pace, lives flowing by, indifferent to individual fates. Inside these walls of polished glass and privilege, Elena Morales was prepared to face whatever challenges awaited, even if she had to begin as the outsider no one wished to acknowledge. Elena moved with graceful determination, bringing an unexpected energy into this sanctuary of modern aristocracy. She strolled unhurriedly past display cases, glancing briefly at silver pieces and more accessible gems, items the average shopper might admire from a distance. But rather than lingering there, Elena headed directly toward the most prominent display, a case protecting rare sapphires, each stone shimmering with oceanic depth, secured behind reinforced glass and state-of-the-art security. Just then, the entrance doors parted, admitting a gust of cool air perfumed with expensive scent. 3 customers entered: Victoria Blackwell, resplendent in a cream cashmere coat and statement pearl necklace, accompanied by Richard and Catherine Montgomery, impeccably dressed, their confident gazes sweeping the showroom as if appraising their domain. Instantly, the atmosphere shifted. Several staff members materialized, forming an invisible escort to guide these VIP guests deeper into the boutique. Soft laughter rippled through the air. Champagne flutes appeared, and professional smiles blossomed on every face. Olivia Chen, the only associate who hesitated, personally unlocked a cabinet to show Mrs. Blackwell a rare blue diamond. Richard accepted champagne while Catherine engaged a young sales associate in animated conversation about the latest collection. From Elena's vantage point, it unfolded like a perfectly choreographed performance, glamour, power, and privilege gleaming in every gesture. Yet for Elena, that dazzling display only underscored the contrast. There she stood beside the sapphires, her hand lightly touching the glass, completely ignored. Across the room, Olivia poured champagne for Mrs. Blackwell but stole a guilty glance toward Elena. In an instant, Alexander Harrington's icy glare made Olivia turn away, as if showing concern for a plainly dressed Latina woman were somehow inappropriate. Alexander materialized at the room's center, imposing in his tailored charcoal suit, platinum hair immaculately styled. He exuded chilling authority born of knowing exactly his place in the social hierarchy, the arbiter who decides who merits welcome and who remains outside, face pressed against the glass. Alexander needed no words, his presence alone enforced order. To him, people like Elena were unwelcome intrusions on this opulent tableau. His steel-gray eyes swept over her with callous indifference before turning to greet the VIP group with polished, aristocratic charm. Elena remained perfectly still, feeling Alexander's presence like a cold draft. Yet she didn't flinch. Her eyes methodically catalogued each piece, memorizing every gemstone and price tag, quietly registering how an invisible barrier had been erected between her and this world. Old memories surfaced, childhood days being followed in stores, boardroom meetings where security mistook her for catering staff. All resurfaced, amplifying the bitterness of the present moment. Still, Elena remained composed, her gaze fixed on the brilliant sapphires behind thick glass. Though the atmosphere grew heavier by the minute, she knew this was just the beginning. The real challenge, and the truth about this store, was only starting to reveal itself. The tension intensified as Alexander detached himself from the VIP group and approached Elena. His footsteps clicked decisively on the marble floor, drawing curious glances from everyone present. His suit was pressed to perfection, his watch catching light with every movement. Alexander embodied the very essence of success this world venerated. Yet beneath that immaculate exterior lay cold authority, barely concealed contempt wrapped in the guise of civility that anyone paying attention could sense. He stopped before Elena, tilted his head, and offered a thin smile, the same condescending smile Elena had encountered countless times when someone, out of place, stumbled into the realm of the elite. "May I help you with something?" Alexander's voice carried just loud enough for nearby staff and the Montgomerys to overhear. Elena was about to respond when Alexander cut her off with a sweeping glance from head to toe, taking in her flats, jeans, and simple coat, all in stark contrast to the luxury shoppers around her. The judgment was palpable without a word, but Alexander wasn't finished. "Perhaps you'd prefer to look at our silver collection over there," he suggested, nodding toward a distant display. "Those pieces are only a few $100s, much more within your budget." Nearby customers turned to stare, half curious, half amused. Victoria Blackwell released a soft, mocking laugh, covering her mouth as though witnessing a brief comedy. Richard Montgomery raised an eyebrow while Catherine averted her gaze, embarrassed but too timid to intervene. A hush fell around the sapphire case. Young staff, Olivia included, busied themselves with cleaning glass, rearranging boxes, or checking inventory. No one wanted involvement in this uncomfortable scene. Still, in Olivia's eyes flickered unease and shame. She glanced at Elena, then hurriedly looked away, her hand trembling slightly over a stack of brochures. The chandelier light reflected off glass, making the sapphires glow more brilliantly than ever. But to Elena, everything felt icy, as if the entire showroom had become a stage where she stood under the spotlight of judgment. She met Alexander's gaze directly, sensing the arrogance etched in every line of his face. It wasn't merely about money. It was the unspoken message that privilege belonged exclusively to those who met arbitrary standards of class and appearance. Elena drew a slow, steady breath. Though she'd endured countless rejections before, this public humiliation in a place meant to celebrate individuality still stung. But she knew what was unfolding wouldn't be just another display of petty cruelty. It would become a costly lesson for Alexander and the entire system he represented. Never had the luxury showroom felt so confining. Yet Elena didn't look away. She understood now that discrimination needed no harsh words. A polite suggestion laced with contempt, a thin smile, a dismissive glance were enough to transform a jewelry store into an invisible prison for anyone deemed unworthy. And in that moment, every role, every social mask began to crack, fissures that Alexander himself, with his arrogance, had set in motion. The tension following Alexander's sarcastic remark seemed to freeze the entire room. Elena, clinging to her dignity, maintained a calm, steady gaze. That composure wasn't weakness but a shield forged through countless challenges. She met Alexander's eyes and spoke in a measured tone. "I'd like to see the sapphire pendant from the Heritage Collection. I've heard it's exceptionally rare and beautifully crafted." A beat of silence. Alexander offered a thin smile and arched an eyebrow as if he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. "Do you know how much that piece costs?" "It's an $85,000 pendant. Definitely not within everyone's reach." He emphasized the price with exaggerated volume, ensuring everyone caught his remark. "We have plenty of items over here that better suit your budget." Some patrons turned, curiosity and amusement flickering across their faces. Others whispered, pitying the woman who didn't know her place. Victoria Blackwell released a mocking laugh and leaned to whisper something to Catherine. Both giggled as if watching a satirical performance. Olivia Chen, still nearby, stepped back, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment for Alexander, yet too intimidated to speak up. She clenched her hands together and stared down at the marble floor, where Elena's solitary silhouette reflected in the polished stone. Alexander pressed his advantage, feeding the humiliation just enough to appear dutiful. "If you like, I can show you some beautiful silver pieces, only $300 or $400, more appropriate for someone like you." He sneered as he glanced at Elena's simple attire, as if her appearance revealed the contents of her wallet. Alexander's smile had lost any pretense of courtesy, morphing into outright mockery. Behind them, Richard Montgomery discreetly checked his phone, avoiding Elena's gaze, while Victoria sighed with bored exasperation, as if this entire scene were mere entertainment on a lazy morning. Other staff exchanged glances with Alexander, eyes shining with curiosity. After all, they'd seen him turn away unsuitable customers before, but rarely with such public spectacle. Elena stood firm, not a muscle out of place, her eyes flickering momentarily. She knew she'd become the target of Alexander's power play, teaching both staff and VIPs exactly who controlled access to privilege. In that moment, every ounce of basic respect owed to any customer, regardless of status, was crushed beneath Alexander's arrogant hand. His words, glances, and smiles were like a cold blade, carving deeper the walls of disdain he'd erected the moment Elena walked in. Yet, in the reflection of those priceless sapphires, Elena's confidence remained undiminished. She understood that the lower they pushed her, the more spectacularly the truth would emerge, under the very spotlight Alexander could never fully control. Amid growing whispers, Elena remained astonishingly calm. She drew a steady breath, met Alexander's gaze, and spoke each word with clear precision. "I've never seen anyone asked about their income when shopping here, nor have I seen anyone's financial statements checked, except mine." Her remark cut through the shop's facade of courtesy like a small, sharp blade. For a heartbeat, even staff around the sapphire case froze. One attendant, mid-pour of champagne for a VIP, glanced up, her face flushing with discomfort. But Alexander, unfazed by any challenge, only curled his lip in a dismissive smile. He stepped back half a pace, swept his arm in a theatrical gesture, as if addressing an audience. "Our store policy is very clear, ma'am. Anyone wishing to purchase jewelry over $50,000 must provide financial verification. It's a security measure, not just for the store, but for our customers. If you can't produce bank statements, pay stubs, or income certification, I'm afraid I can't show you that piece." He emphasized store policy like a protective shield for his personal authority, though it thinly disguised raw prejudice. Just then, in the VIP section, Victoria Blackwell accepted a $130,000 diamond bracelet from Olivia. Victoria beamed, tried it on immediately, and nobody asked her for a single document or proof of funds. She selected freely as Olivia adjusted the mirror and chatted with her like a longtime friend. While Alexander kept his eyes locked on Elena, ready to summon security at the slightest misstep, the atmosphere felt suffocating, as though an invisible barrier had been raised between two worlds. On one side, the proper customers trusted and indulged. On the other, Elena, forced to prove her worth simply because of her appearance and ethnicity. Alexander squared his shoulders and challenged her directly, arrogance in his tone. "I'm merely following procedure. Don't make this more than it is. If you want to handle expensive jewelry, you must comply with the same process as any other customer." Yet everyone could see this process was enforced on only one person, and the entire store bore witness to its blatant injustice. Elena's eyes flicked to Olivia, catching the young woman's look of quiet distress, the look of someone who'd witnessed discrimination but lacked courage to speak up. It was a painful truth in a world where luxury could be bought, but respect and fairness remained elusive. Alexander's words had transcended personal mockery. They were a denial of Elena's humanity, an illustration of how this system operated, hiding bias behind policy, wielding power to maintain exclusion beneath sparkling gemstones. And in that moment, Elena understood she was not alone in this injustice, but she would be the first to bring the truth into the light. The moment Alexander's words faded away, Elena's face remained impassive. She held his gaze without flinching, her voice steady and cutting. "I actually intended to purchase the entire Heritage collection, over $750,000 in total." In an instant, the whole store fell silent. Some customers turned, eyes now glinting with anticipation. Victoria Blackwell smirked. Catherine Montgomery looked astonished, and Richard gave Alexander a weary, knowing shake of the head. Alexander, unabashed in his mockery, threw his head back and laughed so loudly that a champagne glass in a VIP's hand trembled. He wasn't merely laughing at Elena's words. He was laughing at her ambition, her worth, a merciless denial of her very value. "Well, then I'm the President of the United States." His boast echoed through the showroom, deliberately amplified so everyone could hear, the tone dripping with arrogance, as if delivering the punchline of a crude joke. He turned toward security and swept his arm out like a general commanding troops. "Marcus, escort this lady out. Don't let her cause any trouble or distract our real customers." Marcus Johnson, the tall security officer standing nearby, stepped forward. His broad frame and wary eyes spoke of someone who'd known hardship. He froze at Alexander's command, one hand clenching his belt as guilt and confusion clouded his glance toward Elena. Marcus didn't want to humiliate someone who reminded him of his own mother. He knew too well the sting of being singled out, shoved aside because of ingrained prejudice. Yet his fear of losing his job and Alexander's frosty authority kept him from refusing the order. "Ma'am, please cooperate and step outside," Marcus murmured, his voice small and trembling, as though pleading for Elena to spare him further conflict. All eyes in the store were fixed on them. Customers, staff, even Olivia Chen, whose face had gone pale, her eyes lined with sorrow at the spectacle unfolding. Alexander lingered, arms folded and smirk intact, clearly satisfied that his imposed order was being upheld, no matter the cost, publicly shaming a stranger, trampling on someone's dignity. Around the sapphire case, the air felt frozen in place. The gems still sparkled under the lights, but here they only served as backdrop to an unrelenting act of humiliation. At the center of it all, Elena felt a storm of pain, outrage, and silent humiliation swell within her. Yet she did not look away, nor did she plead or erupt in anger. She understood that a Latina woman standing firm between insult and authority was the greatest form of resistance, no matter how much everyone around her wanted to see her break. In that moment, even those accustomed to glittering elegance sensed it. Something had fractured. A boundary had been crossed. And behind those brilliant sapphires lay deep, unerasable cracks. Marcus's gentle plea echoed through the sudden hush. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I have to ask you to step outside at my manager's request." That sentence cut through the surge of emotion swelling inside Elena like a blade. She stood motionless, her knuckles widening around her handbag strap. Every ounce of composure she'd honed through years in boardrooms full of dismissive executives kept her calm on the surface. But beneath it, her dignity was fracturing. No tears fell from her eyes, no sign of despair. Yet beneath the mask of poise, shame and rage burned through every fiber of her being. In a place heralded as the pinnacle of service culture, she, an impeccably polite, dignified customer, was being humiliated and expelled for simply not fitting an arbitrary standard. The showroom felt frozen. Customers who'd stared curiously moments ago now pulled out their phones, pretending to check messages while secretly recording. Some, young and unhesitant, lifted their phones openly, their faces reflecting anger and disgust at the injustice unfolding. A low murmur rippled through the crowd, each whispered remark a fresh sting in the already oppressive air. "I can't believe they're this discriminatory. All because she's not wearing designer clothes. It's absolute humiliation." In the VIP section, Victoria Blackwell crossed her arms, her expression one of gleeful satisfaction at the spectacle. Catherine Montgomery wavered between looking away and leaning in for the finale. Olivia Chen, the lone staff member showing any remorse, stood frozen, lips pressed tight, her hand trembling over a jewelry tray. Even Marcus, the security officer, couldn't mask his regret. He avoided meeting Elena's eyes, his voice shrinking as he spoke. "Please understand, ma'am. I don't want to do this, but I have no choice." Those words echoed in Elena's mind as a merciless reminder of a power structure that always crushes the vulnerable first. She bore no grudge against Marcus, no resentment toward Olivia, or even the sneering customers. She knew they were all products of an inherently unjust world, and today that injustice had been laid bare in broad daylight. Alexander now stood behind Marcus, arms folded, his gaze challenging the room. He raised his voice so everyone could hear. "This lady has disrupted store operations, inconvenienced our VIP patrons, and disturbed the peace. We do not tolerate such behavior at Celestial Gems." In that declaration, Elena was not only cast aside but labeled a troublemaker, providing cover for their blatant discrimination. She felt the chill of the marble under her heels, the heavy perfume drifting from the socialites, the clink of crystal glasses, a suffocating symphony surrounding her in the eye of this public shaming storm. Surrounded by apathy, mockery, and the fear of others being implicated, Elena stood unbowed, her eyes locked on Alexander. She did not weep or plead. Inside her, the resilience forged by years of quiet struggle flared like a spark waiting to erupt into an unstoppable blaze. In that moment, though it seemed they had won, no one, not even Alexander, realized they had driven the unnoticed woman to her limit. And when a person's dignity is trampled so completely, the truth always finds its own way to shine through. The tension in the store was taut as a wire. When Marcus, still merely the enforcer, laid a hand on Elena's shoulder, it seemed the ordeal would end with a quiet escort out. But at that moment, Elena slowly pivoted, her voice strong and resonant. Not the tone of a humiliated customer, but the authority of a leader used to making decisions in high-pressure boardrooms. "Don't touch me. I can walk on my own. But before you remove me, I'd like to introduce myself. I am Elena Morales, CEO of Celestial Gems." In that instant, every sound died. Marcus's eyes went wide in shock, his hand recoiling as if burned, his face drained of color, a mixture of astonishment and fear, as though he'd just realized he'd nearly become complicit in a historic scandal. Olivia Chen, stationed at the jewelry counter, could hardly believe her ears. Her mouth fell open, nearly dropping the tray of diamond rings in her hands. Her eyes, equal parts sympathy and bewilderment, darted from Elena to Alexander, then back to Elena, searching for an explanation for the impossible scene. The entire showroom froze. Customers covertly filming pulled their cameras closer. Some gaped in stunned silence. Others rose to their feet while Victoria Blackwell let her purse slip from her grasp onto the leather settee, oblivious. Alexander Harrington, the same man who minutes earlier had stood triumphant, master of his domain, now stared, his face flushing with shame and confusion. His voice turned hoarse as he forced out a half-hearted smile. "You've got to be kidding. I want to see your ID." Elena didn't hesitate. She calmly retrieved a small leather wallet from her bag and produced an ID card emblazoned with bold letters, Elena Morales, Chief Executive Officer, Celestial Gems. The photo on the card matched the poised, resolute woman standing before them down to every detail. Alexander lunged to snatch it, but Elena withdrew it, her tone icy and firm. "I do not consent to you touching my personal belongings. If you doubt me, call Sofia Rivera, the executive director, right now. Her number is in your store's emergency contacts." Elena's composure and command completely upended the situation. All eyes turned to Alexander, waiting to see how he'd justify what had just occurred. A wave of unease rippled through the room as though a seismic shift was happening beneath the polished marble floor. Alexander swallowed hard, fumbling for his phone, his shaking hands betraying his embarrassment and fear. Olivia, still clutching the jewelry tray, dashed to the fixed phone behind the counter, dialing frantically, her gaze lifted to Elena with a mix of admiration, relief, and lingering shame. The customers who'd been filming murmured among themselves, some hurriedly typing messages, others live-streaming to social media. The store's atmosphere was no longer one of arrogant exclusivity but the thick silence of collective shock, role reversal, and the moment when the underestimated party emerged as the most powerful figure in the room. Elena stood silently, her expression serious yet unassuming. Her eyes didn't rest on any one person, because she knew that from this moment on, nothing could ever go back to how it was. Those who had sneered and belittled her now understood they'd made a mistake that would be remembered long after today, and this was only the beginning of a storm unprecedented in the history of Celestial Gems. The tension in the showroom snapped like a taut string. Just as Marcus, still merely the messenger, rested a hand lightly on Elena's shoulder, it seemed the ordeal would end in a quiet escort outdoors. But in that instant, Elena pivoted deliberately, her voice ringing out with authority. Not the tone of a humiliated customer, but that of a leader accustomed to making decisions under the utmost pressure. "Don't touch me. I can walk on my own. But before you remove me, let me introduce myself. I am Elena Morales, CEO of Celestial Gems." Silence fell like a curtain. Marcus's eyes widened in shock and his hand recoiled as if burned, his face drained of color, a mix of disbelief and fear, as though he'd just realized he'd nearly become part of a historic scandal. Olivia Chen, stationed at the jewelry counter, stared in stunned disbelief, nearly dropping the tray of diamond rings in her hands. Her eyes, filled with sympathy and astonishment, shifted from Elena to Alexander and back again, seeking an explanation for the impossible. The entire showroom froze. Customers who had been secretly filming edged their cameras closer. Some stood slack-jawed, others rose to their feet. Victoria Blackwell let her purse slip from her hand onto the leather sofa, unaware. Alexander Harrington, the man who minutes ago had reigned supreme over his kingdom, now gaped, his face flushed with shame and confusion. His voice cracked as he tried to recover. "You've got to be kidding. I want to see your ID." Elena didn't hesitate. She calmly withdrew a small leather wallet from her bag and produced an ID card embossed in bold letters, Elena Morales, Chief Executive Officer, Celestial Gems. The photo matched the poised, resolute woman before them in every detail. Alexander lunged to snatch it away, but Elena withdrew it, her voice cold and commanding. "I will not allow you to touch my personal property. If you have doubts, call Sofia Rivera, the the executive director, right now. Her number is in your store's emergency contacts. Elena's composure and authority completely upended the power dynamic. All eyes turned to Alexander, waiting to see how he'd justify the spectacle they'd witnessed. An uneasy hush spread through the room, as if a seismic shift had rattled the polished marble beneath their feet. Alexander swallowed hard and fumbled for his phone, his trembling hands betraying his embarrassment and alarm. Olivia, still clutching the jewelry tray, darted toward the counter phone, dialing frantically while gazing at Elena with admiration, relief, and lingering shame. The customers filming whispered among themselves, some hurriedly typing messages, others live-streaming the event. The store's atmosphere no longer reeked of elitist arrogance but resonated with stunned silence, reversal of roles, the moment when the once overlooked person emerged as the most powerful figure in the room. Elena stood silently, her expression grave yet unassuming. Her eyes never lingered on any one face, because she knew that from this moment on, nothing could ever return to the way it was. Those who had sneered and belittled her now understood they'd made a mistake destined to be remembered, and this was only the beginning of an unprecedented storm in Celestial Gems history. After the unassailable truth was laid bare, the store fell into a heavy hush. At that moment, the glass doors swung open. Sofia Rivera, the executive director, with her sleek silver hair, entered flanked by two legal advisors. Her usual warm smile was gone, replaced by the grave expression of someone who'd weathered major crises. Elena stood tall and faced Alexander Harrington, who now looked stripped of all confidence. The sharp lines of his face had softened into confusion, shame, and isolation. Employees, customers, even Marcus, the guard who'd hesitated moments before, fell silent, hanging on every word from these two powerful women at Celestial. Elena's voice rang clear, carrying through every corner of the showroom. Alexander, were you waiting until you knew I was the CEO before treating me with basic decency? If I were just some ordinary woman, no title, no wealth, would you have felt free to demean and shame me the same way? Her question wasn't aimed only at Alexander. It was an indictment of every hidden prejudice entrenched in this world of luxury. All eyes turned expectantly to Alexander, but he only swallowed, voice trembling. I was just following procedure. You know how expensive the merchandise is. If we don't control, his words trailed off into self-justification. Elena refused to let him hedge any longer. Her tone was crisp, unyielding. Procedure does not grant you license to discriminate. Procedure does not justify humiliating a customer because they don't meet your arbitrary standards. And procedure certainly cannot serve as an excuse for your arrogance and prejudice. She pivoted to Sophia, voice steady and commanding. I hereby notify you that Alexander Harrington is terminated, effective immediately, with no notice required. Sophia will oversee his access revocation and escort him from the premises. All severance will be provided in full. That's the humanity you failed to extend to every customer you've scorned here. Her words rang out like a bell in a cathedral, echoing through every heart. Alexander stood dumbfounded, lips quivering, eyes darting for an ally, only to meet cold indifference or bowed heads. But I have a family. I've worked here for over 12 years, he stammered. Elena cut him off without hesitation. How many customers and candidates have been turned away, humiliated, and rejected because they didn't suit your tastes or fit your world? Have you ever considered their families, their dignity? This is the inevitable outcome of your choices. This is not a single mistake, but a pattern of behavior and a mindset. Sophia stepped forward, motioning to her legal team to escort Alexander away. He stumbled out, shoulders slumped, leaving behind the empire he once ruled, a hollow shell now looked upon with both pity and contempt by those he belittled. The store remained in solemn silence. Yet in that stillness, everyone understood a new era had begun. Elena had not only fired a manager but had declared war on an antiquated system of thinking, ready to dismantle invisible barriers and rebuild Celestial on true principles: respect, transparency, fairness, and compassion. And in that moment, justice ceased to be mere words on paper. It spoke at last under the cold sparkle of diamond chandeliers in a world that once prized luxury above all else. The tension in the showroom snapped like a taut string. Just as the legal advisors disappeared down the back hallway with Alexander, who seemed resigned to his fate, he whirled around, his face flushed with humiliation, voice cracking with anguish. Just one mistake and I lose everything. I have a family. I have to live, too. Why does one moment of misjudgment destroy my entire life? Alexander's pained cry echoed into the heavy silence. Former allies, colleagues who once followed his every command, now watched him with detached, uneasy stares. No one rose to defend him. The isolation of a once powerful man now laid bare. Elena stepped forward calmly, her eyes firm yet tinged with compassion. Her voice rang out clear and steady. It wasn't a single mistake. It was a pattern. It was the mindset of selective respect, deciding who deserved dignity and who should be cast aside. How many customers have you hurt? How many walked out of this store shamed while you shrugged it off? Have you ever considered their pain, or were you too busy fostering your own arrogance? Her words cut through the pretense. The murmurs died away. Everyone sensed this was more than a personal confrontation. It was a call to conscience in a place long steeped in exclusion. Alexander stood awkwardly, lips pressed tight, eyes glistening with anger and regret. He searched the crowd for support, but the employees who once whispered encouragement whenever he put someone in their place, now hung their heads in silence. Olivia Chen, the youngest member of the team, avoided his gaze, regret flooding her expression for every time she'd chosen fear over speaking up. Security officer Marcus Johnson, who had hesitated earlier, softly approached and placed a hand on Alexander's shoulder. The touch was no longer obedience but a shared sorrow between two people once on opposite sides. "Please come this way," Marcus murmured, his tone gentle, conveying the helplessness of someone caught between justice and fear. Alexander was led away, his silhouette receding through the back door. A profound hush settled over the store, not the oppressive silence of bias, but the relieved breathing of a place unburdened at last. The staff, who had remained silent, complicit in injustice, looked at one another. Some turned to Elena with grateful eyes. Others nodded quietly, a silent vow to never let the past repeat itself. The customers, those who had once smirked and those who secretly filmed, stood stunned, as if realizing for the first time that true value doesn't lie in gemstones, but in the courage to confront one's conscience and change. And in the moment Alexander walked away, Celestial Gems began its transformation, starting not just with a dismissed manager but with a new commitment to right and wrong in every person who walked through its doors. A heavy silence settled over Celestial Gems after Alexander was escorted away, one that crackled with tense anticipation. Staff clustered in small groups by the display cases, and customers watched quietly. No one wanted to leave when they realized they were witnessing a historic turning point, not just for this store but for an entire service industry long rife with hidden injustices. Elena stood in the center of the grand salon, the chandelier light falling on her calm, determined face. Her words weren't orders. They were a declaration, ringing out powerfully in a space freshly freed from the old tyranny of prejudice. "I'm announcing that this store will close for 3 weeks so every team member can be retrained, from the basics of customer service and interpersonal skills to, most importantly, respecting human dignity and fairness. During this period, you will all receive your full pay. If anyone feels unable to embrace this new culture, one with zero tolerance for discrimination, bias, or injustice, you're free to resign now, and you'll still receive your full severance." The room held its breath. Some of the more senior employees looked uneasy, but most visibly exhaled in relief, their eyes now reflecting admiration and hope rather than doubt. A few nudged each other and nodded as if they'd long awaited this moment. Elena continued, her tone warm yet resolute. "From today forward, any act of discrimination or belittling of customers or colleagues based on background, appearance, or ethnicity will be completely unacceptable. I don't want people who merely follow orders. I need people willing to stand up for what's right. If you're brave enough to help me rebuild Celestial, stay. If not, you have my blessing to leave, and I will respect that decision. At that moment, Olivia Chen, the young associate who'd silently carried the weight of this discriminatory atmosphere, stepped forward, tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Elena. I know I should have spoken up sooner, but I was afraid. I was afraid of losing my job, of being ostracized. I told myself staying silent was safer. But today, I see that silence is part of the injustice. Elena smiled gently and placed a hand on Olivia's shoulder, her eyes both compassionate and firm. Fear makes us silent. But I don't blame you, Olivia. I promise from now on there will be a safe channel for reporting wrongdoing. Anyone who witnesses or experiences injustice can come forward without fear of retaliation. We will protect one another. Only courage and unity will set Celestial apart. Her words felt like a warm breeze after the storm. The young staff who'd long carried guilty consciences nodded in unison. Daniel Ramirez, the Latino team member who'd watched friends get disqualified from interviews for having ethnic names, offered the first genuine smile he'd had in years, as if a weight had finally lifted. The customers watched too, some quietly wiping away tears, others bursting into applause, not for a luxury performance but in honor of courage and the power of change. Elena surveyed the faces before her, knowing the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But in their eyes, she saw faith that from today onward, Celestial Gems would truly begin a new chapter where genuine values are recognized and every person is respected equally. Elena's announcement of a new culture at Celestial hadn't even settled when the first ripple spread beyond the store's glass walls. Just hours after the incident, videos shot by customers and staff showing Elena being humiliated, asked to leave, and then defiantly identifying herself as CEO were all over social media. Clipped together from multiple angles, the footage went viral, not just in consumer rights groups but across major forums and national news channels. The image of Elena, a plainly dressed Latina woman exuding quiet strength, exposing the truth at the heart of the luxury world, held millions of viewers spellbound. The hashtag Celestial Reckoning trended on social platforms for days. Under each video, thousands of comments poured in, outrage at Alexander, admiration for Elena's courage, and countless shared stories of similar silent indignities people had endured. Longtime Celestial clients posted public endorsements of the brand's turnaround, pledging to return only if they saw genuine change. Letters and emails of support flooded corporate headquarters from minority communities, human rights organizations, and women's business associations alike. The story spread so fast that within 24 hours, major networks invited Elena and executive director Sofia Rivera for live interviews. On television, Elena appeared unpretentious, just as she was that day, yet radiated the confidence of someone who knows her worth and refuses to hide the truth. She took on tough questions about racism, privilege in luxury retail, the compromises of young staff like Olivia, and the shame of employees who had once enabled it. Standing beside her, Sofia admitted candidly, "We thought serving the wealthiest customers was enough. We've learned that true service is fair, respectful, and inclusive of everyone." Elena's stirring remarks resonated far beyond Celestial. Luxury can't be a fortress closed to all but the few. It must be a place where everyone deserves respect. If we don't name injustice, we become part of it ourselves. She recounted the moment Marcus, the security officer, wrestled with keeping his job versus doing the right thing, the moment Olivia overcame her fear to speak out, and why a corporate culture can only thrive when every employee is safe from intimidation and empowered to tell the truth. The impact extended beyond Celestial's walls, reaching competitors and major luxury retailers. Facing public pressure, many launched anti-bias training, overhauled service protocols, and publicly vowed leadership-driven change. Prominent talk shows hosted experts, lawyers, journalists, and discrimination survivors debating the incident as a turning point in American social consciousness and consumer culture. The conversation grew bigger than one store. It sparked millions to reflect on their own roles, whether as customers, employees, or leaders, in safeguarding dignity and fairness. What began as a seemingly isolated incident turned into a nationwide debate on ethics, conscience, and transformation, not only in one industry but across society as a whole. In the wake of the public outcry, Elena Morales's commitment to reform at Celestial went far beyond words. It became a full-scale overhaul. 6 months after that fateful incident on Fifth Avenue, Celestial Gems reopened with a stunning new look that left everyone who passed by speechless. The once opaque glass facade designed to separate insiders from outsiders had been replaced by floor-to-ceiling transparent panels, inviting every passerby to witness an atmosphere of openness and warmth. Low consultation tables stood in place of the high, fortress-like counters. No more selective screening or biased greetings. Customers of every skin tone, gender, and age were welcomed with genuine smiles and respect. A prominent sign beside the entrance now read, "Welcome. Excellence belongs to everyone." At the heart of the showroom was the Unity Collection, featuring designs by diverse emerging talents. Amara Johnson, a black college student who once hesitated to apply to a luxury brand, now headlined the new fine jewelry line for her generation. Daniel Ramirez, raised in the city's underserved neighborhoods, was celebrated for his bold, culturally rich designs that championed equality. Each piece was displayed alongside a plaque telling its creator's story of overcoming barriers and pursuing creative dreams, underscoring not only aesthetic value but human value. National and international media flocked to cover the grand reopening, drawn not only by the dramatic transformation of a brand but by the inspiring story behind it, a company brave enough to own its mistakes, embrace change, and elevate compassion and fairness as its guiding principles. Reporters competed to interview Amara, Daniel, Olivia, and the young customers who at last felt they truly belonged in a luxury setting, free from judgment based on appearance, accent, or ethnicity. Olivia Chen, once the timid staffer who feared speaking up, was now assistant manager. She not only oversaw operations but led training for new hires, emphasizing active listening, respect, and equitable conduct. These sessions had evolved from mere formalities into heartfelt exchanges where personal experiences of bias and lessons in empathy were shared as essential parts of the profession. Standing at the podium, Executive Director Sofia Rivera proudly declared, "Celestial will no longer be a brand of exclusion but a symbol of inclusion, respect, and the unlocking of every individual's potential." And there was Elena Morales, shunning any spotlight of self-congratulation, standing humbly among the flow of customers. She listened to laughter echo through the showroom, watched children of every background playing by the display cases, and chatted with Amara and Daniel about ideas for the next collection. In her eyes glowed a quiet pride, not in sales figures but in having set a new standard for the entire high-end retail industry. Luxury was no longer a privilege. It was an opportunity, a space where everyone finds respect and discovers their true worth. Celestial's rebirth was more than a mere store renovation. It had become a living emblem of a society in transformation, one that values people above all glittering trappings, where every old wound fuels a fairer future. The reopening celebration wound down as a pale sunset stretched its glow across Fifth Avenue. Yet guests lingered in the shop, their faces alight with genuine joy and warm smiles. In one corner, beneath a bold sign reading, "True Luxury Equals Respect," Elena Morales quietly observed the scene. Olivia Chen, now more confident and poised, was leading Amara Johnson on a tour of each newly redesigned area, recounting the origin story behind every collection and encouraging the young designer to dream boldly. Standing beside Elena, Sofia Rivera, her friend and colleague who had witnessed every step of this historic transformation, leaned in with a mixture of admiration and gentle concern. "Do you ever regret that stormy day? Do you ever wish it could have been less tumultuous?" Elena shook her head, offering a soft yet resolute smile as her gaze swept the room. In every corner, she saw patrons of every background, black and white, young and old, dressed in designer clothes or casual attire, all confidently trying on the finest jewelry, chatting animatedly with staff, with no hint of self-consciousness or fear of being judged as there once had been. Her reply came in a warm, steady tone that carried throughout the showroom. "The most precious thing here isn't gold or gemstones. What truly has infinite value is the moment when each person finds the courage to embrace change, not just for themselves but for those who have never been heard or truly respected." Sometimes it takes a great storm to sweep away the moss of prejudice from these walls so that real light can shine in. Her words felt both a closing chapter and a new beginning. Everyone present sensed the depth of the legacy Elena and Celestial had created, not simply a resurrected brand but a beacon illuminating the hidden corners of luxury retail, where inclusion, respect, and fairness reigned supreme. When customers finally departed, clutching their little velvet boxes, they carried with them far more than pieces of jewelry. They left with the experience of being truly seen and genuinely honored. The staff, from seasoned veterans to newcomers like Amara and Daniel, understood that each day here wasn't just about sales. It was about safeguarding and passing on a profound set of values. Outside, the celestial sign glowed brightly in the evening light, not as a symbol of exclusion but as a lighthouse beacon, reminding everyone who passed by, only when justice, dignity, and courage speak up can those once forgotten stand at the very center of the story. And so the journey of Elena Morales, the Latina woman once underestimated in her own store, became a wellspring of inspiration for anyone who has ever faced injustice or believed justice to be a distant dream. Because true justice doesn't spring from grand gestures alone. It begins in a heart that refuses to yield to any barrier and in a choice to stand up, even once, for what is right. That, above all, is Celestial's greatest legacy, for today, for tomorrow, and for every soul seeking their true worth amid a world of glitter.